Good afternoon, Rebecca and Amelia. Thank
Hello,
you
Anne.
for,
Hi,
yeah,
Anne.
hi. Thank you for being here this afternoon in December 2024. A couple months ago, you hosted an in-person workshop. What was it called? Menopause myth busting locally. And at the same time, around the same time, I was hosting a book club. We were reading the new Menopause by Dr. Mary Claire Haver, which really centers hormone replacement therapy. And it was a really interesting conversation. But hormone replacement therapy is like one piece of the puzzle and the pie when we're thinking about care for perimenopause and menopause. And so when your workshop came up, I thought, okay, I gotta talk to you guys. I've both seen you for myself as a client. Rebecca, I've been a nutrition client of yours, and Amelia, I've been a physical therapy client of yours. So it just seemed, and we share an office, Amelia, and we're all Santa Cruz locals, providing care for people, folks, and women locally. And Rebecca, and I think beyond for you, you have a virtual practice. Is that right?
Yeah, I do have most of my clientele is local, but they're all spread out. It's great.
Wonderful, wonderful. And as you know, I provide acupuncture and some functional medicine testing and see a lot of women in this phase of life. Rebecca, can you tell us just a little bit about your practice, the name, and again, where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So my practice is functional health, and my program is called Unstoppable Health Coaching. So I really work holistically with clients to support their nutrition, lifestyle, stress habit resolutions. And I am in SoCal, but even for my local clients, many people opt to meet virtually because it's such a great time saving. So I do love to meet people in person. It's great, but I can do everything that I do virtually.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Amelia, excuse me, where are you?
I practice out of my location with you in Santa Cruz, but also in the Pleasure Point area. And I'm a physical therapist specializing in pelvic floor physical therapy. And the bulk of my caseload is women, although I do see some men, but I would say it's like 85 to 90% women at this point. And I see a ton of women in this phase of life and also perinatal. So I would say my practice is pretty split between those two populations. And then more recently, in addition to being a physical therapist, I went through an integrative women's health coaching training so that I've been able to add a lot of skills to my traditional skill set as a PT.
Mhm.
Where I can talk to people a little bit more holistically about just lifestyle medicine in general. And I feel like this plays a huge role in caring for this group of people specifically. So
Great.
excited to share.
Excellent. Well, so you at your workshops earlier this fall, you presented 10 myths. We're not going to go through all of them, but I did, a few of them really stood out. The first one was myth number one, eating less and exercising more is the key for what? For health in perimenopause and menopause. Is that the myth?
Yeah, this is probably, I'm sure you guys can agree working with this population that is one of the most pervasive myths in general when working with both the perimenopause folks and postmenopause folks is in whatever their health goal is that they're working towards, that they're often a phrase that I get is I'm doing what I always have to lose weight, or I'm exercising more than I ever have, and I'm not getting the benefits that I want. I'm not meeting the health goals that I'm looking for. Um, and I'm going to at least speak more specifically to the exercise part of things, that that's a little bit more my lane, and Rebecca will speak to the nutrition side of things. But I think the theme is that they're doing more and more and more exercise to try to meet their health goals. And often that ends up accomplishing the opposite of what they're actually trying to do. And there's a lot of good reasons that that actually makes sense when you look at it from a physiological perspective. when we're overtraining or over exercising, we're basically keeping our bodies stuck in more of a threat response.
Mhm.
And in that threat response, we're not able to build muscle in the ways that we can when we're in more balance. And then in that threat response, our nervous system is essentially holding on to fat a little more in a little clingier way than it would, because we're thinking about we're running away from the tiger or we're about to encounter a famine. And so we're holding on to fat and we're not able to build muscle as easily. So what we're really looking for in this phase of life is to exercise smarter and in ways that are more informed and in tune with this phase of life as a woman. So, and I can speak to a little bit more about what those smarter things are, but Rebecca, I'll let you chime in on your thoughts on from the nutrition side of things.
Yeah, sure. I love how you said, working smarter, not harder, because that is absolutely what needs to happen nutritionally as well. Women believe that they believe the myth because that's what we've been spoon-fed our whole lives. That information is absolutely what we are told, that we just have to restrict calories. We just have to work out harder. It puts the blame on us for the symptoms that we're having, as opposed to like, this was never a good model. And it's always been really important for women to eat enough food to get enough nutrition. So it's absolutely a myth that eating less and exercise more is going to yield results. It's likely going to increase symptoms as we age, and especially during that, roller coaster of a transition, perimenopause, into, onto the other side.
Mhm.
So women need to get enough to eat. It's really super duper important. Can't emphasize that enough. So not getting enough food and nutrients, that's a problem. Also, how we space it out can either really support us or create more issues. So I work with probably 70% of my clientele are, women perimenopause, or who have transitioned through and are, postmenopausal. And what I see time and time again is this, oh, I was rushed. I didn't really eat breakfast. I may or may not have had lunch. And then I was starving at the end of the day and I just could not stop eating. And so we're not getting that balanced nutrition that we need. We need to get protein regularly throughout the day to be able to maintain our muscle mass as we age, as our hormones change. If we're not getting, protein throughout the day, we're doing ourselves a huge disservice. And some people believe that they can make up for lost time at the end of the day and just protein load. Although that's not what we tend to do, if we're being honest, at night, right? We're not protein loading, but that doesn't work. We have a threshold in which we're not going to assimilate any more protein up until a certain
Yeah.
point. So it's super important to evenly space it, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Depending on how hard you train, you might also need some nutritious snacks in there. If you're a heavy duty athlete, as I'm sure Amelia can attest to, in her experience, like, you're going to also need to bring in some nutrients, some quality protein and quality carbohydrate after working out so that your body settles and you're not, driving up cortisol. So usually like around, 30 minutes of when your training ends, because you want to stop that stress response. But for most of us, we're not athletes, we're active women with full lives and doing all sorts of things. And we really need and deserve quality nutrition regularly spaced throughout the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know when I think about getting exercise into my day, when I get it in, it's such a win. I'm not thinking about how I'm then gonna layer in my meals and my snacks. It's like, oh, I did the thing. And then it speaks for itself. But there's a synergy there with exercise and nutrition, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely well put. If you want to get the most, they absolutely play off each other. One is not more important. If you want to get the most out of your nutrition, you all need to be training. And if you want to get the most out of your training, you need quality nutrition. It's an absolute synergy.
And then what's the physiology behind, somebody like I've always exercised this way, I've always eaten this way, and now I can't do it anymore. So what's the physiology, like the setup in this perimenopause, menopause time that is suddenly different where we really need to fine tune these things?
Amelia,
Yeah,
you want to start this one?
sure. This is a big can of worms. We could probably talk all night about this, but I think in a nutshell, because of all of the many, many roles that estrogen has, and some of those are in the way we metabolize food, some of those are in the way that we build muscle mass, and the relationship between fat and estrogen, that it basically kind of has fingers in lots of different systems of our body and functions of our body. But one of those keys is in regards to the relationship of fat to muscle. And having that drop in estrogen that we go through during the menopausal transition lends towards a higher distribution of fat, especially around the middle of our body. That's sometimes called visceral fat. And it's linked to a lot of other health issues. And then it also makes it harder for us to actually build muscle mass. So we actually just need a bigger stimulus, external stimulus, in this case, exercise, to create the message essentially to our nervous system that we need to build muscle. So without estrogen being as much of a player in our bodies, then it just becomes a lot harder for us to do that than it did at other phases of our life.
Wonderful. Yeah, well said. So did you want to add to that, Rebecca?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. That was great. As Amelia was saying, the pervasiveness of the declining hormones, it extends to the belly fat accumulation, the challenge of putting on muscle, and insulin plays a role in that. So how our bodies begin to metabolize glucose, which is blood sugar from what we eat, and insulin, which is an important hormone for lots of things, one of which being fat storage. That conversation changes as both estrogen and progesterone go down as we are transitioning to the next phase of life. And so a lot of women are going to struggle with what they were always used to eating, right? That maybe didn't get converted as easily into fat because their hormones were helping out, and it wasn't so easily raising blood sugar. So when blood sugar goes up more easily, our body gets this message that, what's going on? We know this isn't supposed to be high. So okay, we need to clear that out of the bloodstream. We need to get more insulin pumped out there. So we end up with more insulin, and that can be a vicious cycle. So it very much ties into that.
Got it. Yeah, I get this question all day long.
Yeah.
Every day I'm in the clinic. And
I
then
like to think
yeah, go
about
ahead.
estrogen is like it enhances lots of the functions of our body. So without it, then we just don't have that extra buffer.
Right,
And so then it's kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back situation over and over again with lots of different facets of our health functions.
right, right. I mean, we have estrogen receptors all over the body,
Mhm.
right? And
Yep.
so we know that our whole body, we rely on estrogen and other hormones, right, throughout much of our life. So it is a big shift. It's a big shift.
It's
And
huge.
in regards to lifting, another myth that you guys talk about is the myth that lifting heavy will make me bulky and or cause injury. Can you bust this myth, Amelia?
I think I can. I feel pretty confident. And it is really well supported in research. And we're lucky enough to be living in a time, not that we hope it doesn't get better in the future, but we're lucky enough to live at a time where there's so much more research being done on women's health issues and what can we do, like you mentioned earlier, and from a hormone therapy perspective, there's a lot of information that's changing about that, but also there's a ton of information changing about how we can exercise and eat more specifically for this span of our life. And lifting heavy is one of those recommendations that you see over and over and over again in the research for women who are both perimenopausal and postmenopausal and having a world of different benefits. And there's a little bit of a caveat to that, as you know, the previous question or the previous myth that we busted was exercising more isn't necessarily better. So lifting heavy, with the asterisk I'm alluding to, is in lower amount of reps. So it's higher loads, higher amounts of weight, but with relatively low number of reps. So that's that exercising smarter piece. So in an ideal world, we want to choose, well, we want to be smart about who we work with. So we want to choose somebody to work with who's going to help us keep us safe, especially if lifting isn't something that you feel super comfortable with, or maybe you haven't done a lot of previously. Then you want to work with someone who can help you do it safely and help you build up gradually. But the end goal is to choose a weight that you can do less than 10 total reps of before you completely fatigue. And that you may only be doing 3 to 4 number of exercises in your full exercise routine. So it's that heavier weight, but relatively low load. And one of the other, I guess, side perks to that is it doesn't mean you have to exercise for a longer period of time. It might mean that your workout is actually a little bit shorter, because you're choosing that higher load and lower rep type of framework.
Got it. So then where does cardio fit into all of this? Because I think, historically, the exercising more would mean, working longer or harder at cardio. Does cardio still have a role right now?
Absolutely. But it actually is kind of a similar recommendation. So, I just want to say exercise in general is a good thing. Moving our bodies is a good thing. So I don't want to, use any kind of create any kind of fear around exercising as a whole. You do want to watch for those signs of overtraining. But in general, moving your bodies is good. But one of the other really strongly supported types of exercise that we see in the research coming up for this age of women is high intensity interval training. And again, that high intensity thing comes in and seems like it's counterintuitive based on the last myth. But it's the same kind of idea as the higher load, lower repetition, where we want to go for short bursts of intense cardiovascular exercise. So that could look like walking up a flight of stairs. It could be a short jog if you're somebody who's comfortable running. It could be jumping jacks. It could be swimming, anything, but for a short burst of time. And that could be anywhere between 15 to 30 seconds. And then we want a recovery time that allows us to fully recover. So that might be a few minutes or so of relative recovery time before you hit that high intensity short burst of exercise again. And you're doing repeated rounds of this where you're exercising intensely, you're resting for a long period of time. You're exercising intensely, so you're getting your heart rate up and then getting it down, getting it up, getting it down. And then the other rule of thumb is you don't want to exceed more than 20 minutes of that type of exercise. So a lot of classes out there are like an hour long of these high intensity, HIIT kind of classes. But that starts to get us into a zone of our physiology again, where that's more of that overtraining that drives more of a cortisol response and ends up leading to more storage of fat, less building of muscle. So we want to keep it in that 20 minutes or less of total exercise time, but high intensity intervals.
That's really helpful. Yes. And Rebecca, do you have anything to add to that? I know you have a fitness background as well.
Yeah. What works for us in our 20s does not work the same way for us in our 50s or beyond. So, or even I would say in our 40s. So everything Amelia said is spot on. Learning to listen to our bodies if we're feeling really wiped out, not getting good recovery, those are signs to listen to that you may need some shifting around in what you're doing. We are so trained to, do that hour of cardio, go as fast as you can. And that's just simply not going to effectively help you address the roller coaster of hormones later on. Cortisol, as Amelia mentioned, is, we all know that as our primary stress hormone, does a lot of really important things. We need cortisol. We just need it to be balanced with other hormones, and we do not want to be driving that, the spiking of cortisol through that kind of training, or through eating things that are also upsetting to our system. Lots of processed food, lots of starchy carbohydrates, sugar, caffeine, alcohol, etc. Those things are going to tend to drive cortisol, and it's going to be counterproductive to what you're trying to accomplish through your hard-earned workouts. So training smarter, getting those rests, do things that you like, and then listen. I recently had to, really take a look at my regimen. I'm very disciplined with working out. It's like, I'm not recovering. Like, I'm sore as crap. And so that's not a good thing. Like, if I'm staying that sore, then I need another rest day. So I need to do some gentle movement. I like how Amelia said, like discerning between exercise and movement, just moving our bodies around in a variety of ways is really important. So it's like, okay, I need to not maybe train as hard, but of course I'm going to move my body.
Yeah.
I think a lot of women need to know that there's a lot of value in that. And if you're staying really sore, that's a great invitation to reevaluate.
Got it. Any other signs that we should look for overtraining? Either one of
Yeah,
you?
but there's a lot of overlap with other things. So it's like, I'm not sleeping as
Yeah.
well. My appetite's thrown off. I'm feeling more emotional. I'm having an increase in feelings of anxiety, increased weight. But again, that can be so many other things too. So Amelia, what's your rule of thumb for that? Because I tend to go on, how's my energy feeling? If I'm feeling tired a lot, and I'm, getting my good sleep and all of that. But again, women who aren't getting good sleep, they might feel tired all the time. So that's not a good barometer. So I guess you got to listen to your own body, what's normal for you, and then lean into that a little bit. But Amelia might have some other suggestions as well.
I mean, I think you hit the big ones of like, I'm asking people like, how quickly are you recovering after a workout? What's your energy feel like? And taking, giving yourself kind of, I would say, a timeline of a couple of weeks of trying whatever that new intervention or that new experiment on yourself is. Give yourself a little bit of time to really feel into it, because sometimes there's just like, you have a day where you don't sleep well, and there's always, off things here and there, but give yourself a couple of weeks to really make that judgment of like, okay, over the last couple of weeks as a whole, I can tell I'm really sore, as you said, Rebecca, or I just feel drained. But give yourself a little bit of time to really evaluate whether that's true on a broad level or if that's just kind of like a one-off day.
Sounds like it would be good to have somebody in your corner, like a health coach or another or a practitioner, to help you, discern what's going on, because, this is such great information. But I think, one thing that I hear from my patients is like, oh, I'm so glad I'm not doing this on my own, or attending workshops like yours. So incredibly helpful. So you just touched on, Rebecca, myth number 5, which cortisol is always the enemy. So can you just like paraphrase what you just said and help us understand how
Sorry
it's
about my
the enemy?
dark.
We're in the dark.
Oh, the
Sorry
lights
about
are
that.
like, you don't
Yeah,
move.
it's motion censored. So sorry, I'm waving around like a weirdo. Go
Sorry,
ahead,
Anne,
Rebecca.
to paraphrase that cortisol is not always the enemy.
Yeah. hmm
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, cortisol is really important. It is an anti-inflammatory. It is the spark of life. We couldn't get up in the morning without cortisol. It is what gives us energy. We want it to be balanced. So we accomplish that through diet, lifestyle, all the things that we do or don't do, the things we say yes and no to. Having rest time is really important. So we need cortisol. We just want to eat in such a way that it's not causing our bodies to interpret how we're eating as a threat, as a stressor, something that needs fixing. So we talked about, eating regularly. That's a really good example of how to keep your cortisol levels even. If you skip meals, that can actually lead to cortisol going up to manage your blood sugar because you didn't eat something that did that for you and provided you with nutrition and energy. And so you're kind of relying on the adrenal glands to be that crutch. How we move our bodies. Are we training in a way that it's hard, but then we recover, in which case the body is like, all right, we're fine. Or are we really, challenging ourselves so much and we're not getting that recovery, in which case that's going to elevate cortisol. And cortisol can be anti-inflammatory when it's balanced, but when it's not balanced, it's actually inflammatory and it can lead to all sorts of connective tissue issues. Say that 3 times fast. So things like your cartilage, your tendons, your muscles, your skin, these are things we all care about. And if we are raising our cortisol levels up repeatedly, kind of living in that way, they take a toll. We're more prone to injury. So again, our hard work is not going to pay off if we're overdoing it.
And then how would that cycle play into insulin?
Yeah. So when cortisol levels go up, it tends to suppress thyroid hormone production, which keeps our metabolism healthy and robust. When
Absolutely.
cortisol spikes up, blood sugar also tends to spike up. And then insulin has to come up to bring the blood sugar levels down because it's not safe for us to have elevated, continuously elevated blood sugar levels. It's really damaging to the body. So insulin, again, is not the bad guy. Cortisol is not even the bad guy. The bad guy, if we want to say anything's the bad guy, is the influences that derail our system. And it forces us away from having that balance.
Sure. Sure. The body is ultimately in those responses trying to protect us, right? That's always the ultimate goal is, protecting vital organs, but it comes at a cost of other things that can show up as chronic health issues, right? Yeah. Okay. So cortisol is not always the enemy. That is
Amelia and I want
number
to add
5.
on to that.
Yeah.
I know she's well versed in this as well.
Well, I was thinking, just listening to you guys talk about something that I don't think we got into this necessarily as a specific thing in our workshop, um, but it can be, I know it can be really overwhelming to women who are navigating this time of their life, especially perimenopause. That tends to be this roller coaster of like, okay, now I'm thinking about how I'm managing my nutrition and I'm managing my exercise and I'm dotting my I's and I'm crossing my T's. And they're, again, kind of doing all the things, and maybe they're doing all the things the right way. But I think it's worth also just bringing attention to the energy and attitude that you're bringing to the way that you eat or the way that you're exercising. Because I think if we're coming to do it from a way that we're stressed about it and we're managing and controlling it, then it again tends to have a little bit more of that cortisol spike, as opposed to something that looked more like, I'm choosing this form of exercise because it makes me feel good and I feel strong. And it's something that brings me joy or connection to others, or there's a food that I just love eating and makes me feel so good and relaxed, or whatever it is. But remembering that like the overall energy of what you're doing for your health has an impact on what you're going to potentially soak up from those health practices. But yeah, I think that's at least worth bringing to attention, especially because there are so many things to do and so many different recommendations
Yeah.
for this group of people.
Yeah, and it touches upon something that I think about a lot too, is that this idea of self-care is somehow it's like branded as like separating yourself from society and like the bubble bath, right? And it's like, oh man, like what gives me energy is like laughing with friends or dancing or listening to music or playing music, especially with community. Like when I think about self care, or like really deeply caring for myself, it's with connection with others. So I just like gonna put in my own myth and kind of all along the lines of what you just said, Amelia. It's like our attitudes and our feelings about like what we're doing, right? Yeah.
I love
Um,
that. I think that's such a good point. Because it does depend on the individual. I just had lunch today with one of my good friends, and she was letting me know like she can't come to um this movie night that I'm hosting, which is like my definition of the best time ever. Like we're gonna watch a Bad Moms Christmas. It does not get better than that. Like pajamas, cozy, laughing butts off to this. Anyway, and she's just like, I can't do people right now. Like I would do a movie night with you, but I can't do people right now. So it was so interesting. Like you got to listen to yourself, see what you're needing, what's going to fill your cup,
yeah.
and try to give that to yourself. So it's always shifting.
It's always shifting and just listening to ourselves because I think, in this world of Instagram and social media, like we hear so many sound bites throughout the day. And, ultimately we need to come back to ourselves and like we're really the ones who are ultimately going to know if something is right for us or not. It's not following a specific script of how to exercise, how to eat, can be stressful, really stressful if we start to live that way, right? Um, so along going back to cortisol, going back to eating less, the myth number 6, fasting is helpful, longer is better. I am so curious what you're going to say about this, you guys.
Oh, I hate that myth. It's yeah, I have so many women just, talking about how they, it's like, do I need to, I guess I need to just deprive myself more. I gotta like pull back and like have more time where I'm not eating. And it's like, well, first of all, most of that research was actually done on men. Most of the fasting data, it is not on perimenopause and menopausal women. It is on dudes. So and then their bodies are not the same as ours. So it hasn't adequately been studied in peri and postmenopausal populations. So we really need to lean into when it comes to fasting, one size absolutely doesn't fit all, and your body is already dealing with these hormonal fluctuations. Like we just talked about all of these things that are going on. We definitely don't want to add to that by, again, depriving, kind of circling back to that first myth. We need to feed our bodies adequately. And that means not underfeeding and not overfeeding, attempting to find that Goldilocks position. As Amelia said, don't stress about it. You're here to like, get some information, but to know like I need to nourish my body. What is really important is to have a 12 to 16 hour rest. Let your body digest, let your body clean up. If we're eating all the time, that's also stressful on our system. And our gut bacteria really need a break in order to do what they do after we eat. So they need a minimum of 12 hours to process and get the benefits of what we have eaten. We take the time to eat healthy. Well, that gut bacteria needs time to process that and ferment things and create nutrients, vitamins and some short chain fatty acids that help with the inflammation. That we're not getting that support because our estrogen and progesterone is low. So we need that gut microbiome to be helping out in that arena. So we need that 12 to 16 hour break. And you got to listen to your body. 16 is not better than 12 necessarily. So if you are starving, hangry, shaky feeling in the morning at 12 hours, you should eat breakfast. Like that's when you should eat breakfast. If I go to 16 hours, like sometimes it's not a problem at all. Other times I'm like, I feel like garbage. And I actually did a test with myself where I wanted to do a study and find out, well, what's my Goldilocks position? Turns out it's about 13 to 14 hours. And I actually had better body composition, more energy, more even mood when I am in that 13, 14 hour range. And if I push to 16, I can, but it was diminished returns. So the research does not say like you're going to have, well, actually, the research does say that. But again, that data, the research was done on dudes, and
Mhm.
men do tend to do better with fasting, but that's not us. So we got to really listen to our bodies.
Yep. So we're listening to hunger cues. What else are we listening to? Because, Rebecca, we've worked together. I've been your client, and when my like body and my brain need energy, I don't necessarily get hungry. I don't necessarily feel hungry, but when my concentration starts to go and I'm not making sense, even my eyes will get blurry, which is, by the way, it's gone too far. Like that's not my only cue, but people do have different cues. So like, what would your cues be for like your optimal fasting window?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm glad you brought up what your cues look like because for me, it's hungry. Like my tummy's like, girl, go get some food. Or I might just like start to feel a little anxious, a little edgy,
Yeah.
a little less patient. But I get the brain fog too. Sometimes it's like, I don't want to concentrate on this. Like I'm getting distracted. That could be a cue. Energy level, like, oh, feeling tired. That could be a really good cue as well. I'm sure there's more, but those are the ones that pop out at me at the moment.
Yeah. Awesome. And Amelia, do you have anything to say like about the fasting myth? And especially I'm curious like how it relates to working out. So many people work out in the morning and then they're like, oh, well, then I'm just gonna wait until lunch, which is actually one. So how does that work?
Yeah, I mean it's a delicate balance. Well, I think one thing that I always think about with fasting, and especially with this group of people specifically in perimenopause and postmenopause, is the protein and fiber recommendations are high. Because again, of that drop in estrogen, making it harder for us to actually put on or, even just sustain our muscle mass, that we really need good, high quality protein in our diets and a good amount of it. And it's actually really hard to get enough protein and enough fiber in a window of time that's really narrow in the day. It's just not practical. Somebody's fasting for 16 hours or longer potentially. It's really hard to get the high quality protein and fiber that we need, especially the recommendations that are ideal for peri and postmenopausal women.
Yeah.
So it's just impractical to get what you need essentially in a small time window.
And then
Yeah.
you
But
or Rebecca also said something about how it's important to eat after exercising um, can you explain that again?
Yeah, so when we train heavily, we do need to consider that we might need some extra nutrients in the body. And that's for the workload that we're doing, but also if we are training really hard, our body can get this cortisol response because it was hard. It was a real challenge. And so when we eat about 30, within a 30-minute window, after that hard training, getting good quality protein and good quality carbohydrates, not chips, then it stops that cortisol from spiking up and just kind of lets the body know that we're good, we're digesting now, parasympathetic nervous system. And but most of us aren't. I'm not training on that level. Like I do a hard workout. I'm sure you both do a hard workout, but I'm talking about like an extended period, like wait, like over an hour, like a 2 hour uh, method of training where it's
Okay.
your body's taxed for a long period of time and it's a heavy load.
Okay. So some people could theoretically like exercise in the morning, just doing like a moderate workout and then eat a couple hours later, and that wouldn't be a problem.
Depending on their timing, right? Are they gonna be hungry for lunch and then are they gonna, get a good healthy dinner? That would be, the question mark that I would ask. Like when are you working out? If it's quite early in the morning, if you're waking up at 5 a.m. to exercise, I'm not, but maybe you are. Maybe you're waking up at 5 a.m. to exercise. And then if you're eating at 7 and you're, getting your good nutritious breakfast and then you're having a healthy lunch and dinner, that can be fine.
Yeah.
I think again, it comes down to it's all very individual. And I'm sure some people, that's actually sounds like I am the 5 a.m. workout person, at least at this phase of my life. It's the window of time that works consistently. It's not my necessarily preferred time. But right now I have a 1-year-old, so it's when it works consistently for me. I don't think I eat probably within an hour and a half, a good high protein, high fiber breakfast. And that feels pretty good for me right now. But I think what can happen again, like kind of what you're talking about earlier in this phase of life is that the amount of cushion that we have that we could get away with before in perimenopause gets
Yeah.
diminished. And so sometimes that same, kind of schedule, that morning workout, wait a couple hours to eat until you eat breakfast kind of thing, you might not be able to get away with anymore because you just don't have that little bit of extra cushion from the influence of estrogen. And so that might not feel good to you anymore. You may need to eat more quickly, or within a different frequency throughout the day in relationship to your workout. But I do think it's highly individualized, at least from what I see with my patients. And it's also just a juggling act of like, well, when practically does it work in your life for you to work out? And what does your meal look like? And what's your meal preparation situation? What kind of health, so there's so many balls to juggle, that I think it's what realistically works in your life and also what feels good to your body and figuring out what the sweet spot is between your schedule of working out in reference to when you eat.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Well, you guys, you answered what I think 3 or 4 or 5 myths. Myth number 1 was eating less and exercising more is the key. You busted that. You busted myth number 3, lifting heavy will make me bulky and cause injury. Myth number 5, cortisol is always the enemy. You busted that. And you also busted myth number 6, fasting is helpful and the longer the better. So thank you. That was really so much information. I hope that you do host another workshop soon. And I know that individually, both of you guys are around town, talking to groups of people. Rebecca, how can people find your events?
Yeah, best way to do that is you can go to my website, choosinghealthnow.com. And a couple things. I've got my events posted on there. So yeah, you can always, go there and check. But most people are not going on people's websites. They like to get something in their inbox. So you can also opt in for my newsletter. I send out maybe 2 a month. And there will be updates for any upcoming events right there. So that's a great option. If you opt in on my email list, you'll also get a free gift, and you'll get to know when Amelia and I are going to be myth busting menopause yet again, because we definitely will be.
Awesome. And Amelia, how can people find you and what you're up to?
Yeah, similar mode of communication. You can go to my website. It's ameliafosterphysicaltherapy.com. And I do post events there. I do have a sign up for my newsletter there, which is usually a monthly newsletter. I don't have any events scheduled, which is on purpose. I'm giving myself a little break from events for the holidays. But I really enjoy doing community-based education. So I'd like to do more of that kind of thing in the future. And hopefully coming up in January, we'll be back out there.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you
Yeah,
so much
thank
for
you,
joining
Anne.
us and speaking to our audience today.
Thank you for having us. It was awesome.
You're welcome. All right, we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Anne.
All right, bye.
fun.